Welcome to the Axiom webinar, Recruiting, Retaining, and Promoting a Diverse Talent Pool. I am honored today to interview my friend and colleague, Neil Wilcox, who I've known I was thinking back, Neil, we met several years ago. I'll come to that in a minute, but Neil Wilcox is the Executive Vice President and Chief of Staff to the CEO at Fiserv, and he's the former Senior Vice President and General Counsel of USAA. Welcome, Neil. How are you?
Debbie, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me today. And I was going to check you in terms of how long we've known each other. It's been a long time, but it's
You
always
know,
great to.
yeah, it's terrific. I was thinking we may have originally met, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but October of 2017, I was a speaker at a Minority Corporate Counsel Association event, which is a great organization we're both involved in. And I think it was over dinner at their Creating Pathways
That's
award
right.
ceremony. Does that ring a bell?
That rings a bell. Absolutely.
Okay. And then we, of course, collaborated in a bunch of different venues since then, have kept in touch. And so this is a real treat to be able to have this time to chat with you one-on-one today. So with that, I want to just get right into the topic at hand, and put some context around it, though, by getting into your background and want you to tell us a little bit about your career path. And in doing so, share the single most important experience you've had that is helping you navigate during these tumultuous times.
Thanks, Debbie. And for me, and I'll give somewhat of the abridged version, but after college, worked for 4 years and then went to law school. So I didn't go straight from undergraduate school to law school. After leaving law school, I worked at a law firm in New York City for 4+ years. And then had the opportunity to go to the Chase Manhattan Bank, now JP Morgan Chase, and spent a total of 15 years there. Actually had a break in the middle of my time there to go to Marsh & McLennan Companies, the insurance broker, back to Chase, and then and did a number of different things at Chase. Like I said, was there for about 15 years. And then left Chase to go to First Data Corporation in 2015. And again, just a terrific opportunity, help the company go public, and work with really terrific folks there. Then had the opportunity to go to USAA in 2018. And then fast forward about a year, served as their interim general counsel for a little over 9 months. And then had the opportunity to kind of come back to what was First Data, which now is Fiserv. And so started about a month ago at Fiserv in my current role. And the other part of your question I find very interesting, because I think all of us have journeys that bring us to a particular place in time. And for me, it's really having had the experiences that I've had around what I'll call crisis management, but just being able to see either companies, or in the case of the financial crisis about 10 years ago, really the industry going through certain things, and being part of that and being able to contribute to the company I was part of to hopefully make things better. No two crises are the same necessarily, but I think you can learn from and extract from those experiences a number of skills that can help you in whatever crisis is presented before you today. And a lot of times you don't even know what those skills are.
Right.
But I think part of it is also the confidence that's built from having gone through it.
Yes, and I think it's interesting because we are in this crisis, and it's obviously a multitude of levels. There's the global pandemic, there's the racial inequity and the social justice issues. There's issues around, of course, the financial implications. So there's just a multitude of challenges that are going on. And it's interesting to me that you've made this switch in another iteration of such a distinguished career. And I wonder, what do you hope to achieve in this new platform in a non-legal function? And do you hope to continue to have influence in the legal function in this new role?
Great question. I think the broad answer is yes. I'm a big believer. I think the skills that we learn in either practicing law or being involved in the legal service provision of legal services there are a number of skill sets that I think are beneficial beyond, that particular area of either practice or business experience. So I think, in terms of what you bring from the standpoint of analytics, how you problem solve, how if it's more of a negotiation, you can negotiate your way through different things. So I look forward to applying the skills that I've, gathered over the years in a different way. It's been kind of an area that I've always been interested in, even from my undergraduate days. And again, I didn't go right to law school, so have always, I think, harbored this interest in doing something in a non-legal capacity. So I'm excited about the opportunity, but at the same time, I do think that the skills and training that we have as as lawyers and legal professionals will certainly help. And I do think that there will be opportunities to hopefully influence in a positive way the legal profession. I don't know that I'll be retaining outside counsel, for example, in the same way that I did in a prior role, but certainly working with attorneys both in our company as well as externally. And I intend to remain engaged in a number of the activities that I've been involved with. I'm still on the board of MCCA and expect to continue to serve in that capacity as well. So again, and by the way, if there are better practices that I see either in the technology space, for example, or in the accounting space or elsewhere among the team that I'm with now, happy to share those. And I think that's part of what we need to do as professionals generally, really be more open-minded about sharing best practices.
I think you're absolutely right. In this audience, there are obviously a lot of lawyers on it. They'll be upset to hear that they may not be able to get business from you, but I know you're going to be a tremendous influencer there. And I think you're thinking around having this interdisciplinary opportunity to really learn from technology or different industries or practices, I think is something we really need to focus on more, because there are these universal themes that are challenging all of our industries right now. And for somebody like you, who's been a historic leader in legal, to be able to now be in an executive function outside of legal, there's so much knowledge that your colleagues will benefit from and the broader community. So I think that's exciting. And with that context, having a better idea of the audience seeing your background, I want to transition to the topic at hand and really dig into this issue around developing a diverse talent pool. And I want to encourage all of our listeners to submit comments in the comment box, because I'd love to entertain those questions throughout and put them to you. So please do that in terms of the audience. And let's start really with this issue of recruiting diverse talent. I think that one of the big concerns is the exclusivity of the process, that diverse candidates are not always getting access to either the universities that then are real feeding grounds for those top employers, or the networks, the social networks and professional networks. And that issue around access to opportunity then prevents these diverse candidates from really getting access to the top employers. What are your recommendations along these lines to try to address that?
Yeah, I think that, going into it, you really have to be intentional in terms of your focus. And, I think also being willing to kind of expand your boundaries. What I mean by that is to really, take input from others who may have had experiences looking at maybe places that you have not looked, or leveraging platforms that you've not used. But I think people have to generally get outside of what might be their comfort zone. A lot of employers, and I don't want to disparage anyone, but a lot of employers, you have your go-to recruiters, you have your kind of go-to methods to attract talent, and those are perfectly fine. But what I mean when I say being intentional is that if it's maybe an undergraduate pool of candidates you're looking at, maybe you need to go to a historically Black college or university and go on campus to look at those schools, or seek out people from the Asian Bar Association, or leveraging MCCA again if you're looking at attorney talent. But go outside of maybe your comfort zone, because I'm a huge sports fan. And I always think of it from a talent perspective. And, how can I get access to the best talent? And often to do that, you have to cast a wide net. And that wide net may not be the network that you have from your college undergraduate days or from your professional career. So it's finding ways to really go outside of that, and looking to other means. And I've tried to make myself available through the course of my career, and I know others, again, through different affinity groups and organizations, do that. So there are plenty of groups that you can reach out to, who are really all very terrific: LCLD, MCCA, NOL, NAMWOLF, just to name a few, that really, I think, would encourage, and be very welcoming to folks reaching out to them.
I think those are some great suggestions. What I've also seen work really well at employers is to go directly to your diverse lawyers or employees and have them be ambassadors to tap into their communities. And I say this with a note of caution because in speaking to a lot of my Black colleagues and friends right now, I know there's a disproportionate burden on them to carry the weight. And so I think it is really wonderful to be able to tap into those communities where you can, but being mindful that this is a community that already, I don't have to tell you, of course, is disproportionately burdened right now and has just an enormous amount of pressure on them to be that representative every day. But really to be able to access communities that we otherwise can't reach is going to be one critical way, I think, that we address this issue.
And Debbie, if I can add to that, because I agree with you, I would, I don't want to say this too strongly, but I would caution employers who do that to do what you say. And I've had this happen to me, so I will share it. But what you don't want is to have an employer reach out to an employee and say, "Oh, we want this," but really have it be lip service. And I think it's important because, if you think about it from the employee's perspective, my perspective, you're asking me to tap into a network. And I've got, friends I've known 20, 30, 40 years, who have their own careers. And candidly, I want to be respectful of them and their time too. And so I think it's important, certainly, to do that, but it's got to be meaningful. It can't really be lip service. But I agree with you. I think it's a way to really meet terrific people. And I would encourage employers who are serious about looking at diverse talent to do that.
I think that's a really important highlighted point that you're making. And the other piece of it is in employers reaching out to their diverse colleagues to try to get their assistance, to do so with humility and with an understanding that they don't understand all the issues. They will never understand all the issues. So to go into those conversations and not presume a sense of knowledge or, the range of challenges that person may personally be experiencing. So I think it's really a fine line. And without that appropriate deference and humility, there are a lot of landmines here, and we have to be really thoughtful about it. One issue I think is sort of heightened it, of course, is this whole virtual and hybrid workplace that we're in right now. And so once you do get on board and are effective at recruiting diverse talent, the next question is really, how do you train that talent effectively? How do you convey culture online in this remote and/or hybrid workplace and really onboard and inculcate a culture that people want to be a part of?
Hey, Debbie, this is, I think, really in the heart of the pandemic, one of the critical questions. And hopefully the chat line lights up because everyone can share great ideas here. I don't know that anyone has solved this one. I can tell you on the one hand, I think there are still open questions around productivity in this environment. I know personally, I'd say the first month and a half, it was almost like an adrenaline rush. Can we do this? And there were so many issues with getting really an entire company to a work from home point of view and the supply chain that comes with that, and really the clients, of course, and everything that goes with that to make sure that it works and continues to work. And then, and again, speaking personally, kind of hit a bit of a rut, and it wasn't like you could take any time off, but once the adrenaline wore off, it became more of a grind, and finding ways to get through that. So while this isn't necessarily part of recruiting, I think it's important to be mindful of these things when you're talking about onboarding people. The lack of direct physical connectivity with folks. So, I had to come up with ways to make sure I was keeping in touch with my team. And we did virtual happy hours and things like that, which I think were good icebreakers and ways to step away from the work, because we also all noticed that our work days were expanding. And because you never really left the office, you were always at the office and always at home, and kind of balancing that. The challenges of those either who had school age children or parents they were taking care of, or things like that, being mindful of that and respectful of people's time, and building in buffers so that folks can deal with those things. And again, talking about the employee base, but when you think about bringing folks on board into this type of environment, I think you have to over index on being mindful of those things. Communicate. I think it's really important to get the pulse of people, make sure that, yeah, the work may be getting done, but are you okay? And check in with people in really an empathetic way, because you don't know what happens when the Zoom call goes off or whatever else happens. And yeah, you can see the emails. Frankly, I worry when you see the emails at 9 or 10 at night. And is this maybe quiet time where the kids are sleeping? You can now turn your attention to it, or something else going on. And, of course, balancing, not getting too personal. But I do think that you really have to tap into your softer skills and be more empathetic, and really make a conscious effort to be aware of how your teams are doing. And again, when you're bringing in new people and when you're bringing in diverse people, I think that you've perhaps should even index further on those types of things.
You're absolutely right. And I think as a leader, one of the things can really make a difference is to model good behavior yourself. And by having, let's say, exercising that email restraint on late nights or early mornings or weekends, if something's not time sensitive or not client driven, that modeling of behavior, I think, can set a really good tone. Because a lot of your remarks really are sort of, the underlying theme is around respecting burnout and trying to keep your team engaged and morale up and things like that. And I love a lot of your suggestions. I think one more to consider is, I found, a lot of people are trying to capture the informality of what is normally the case when we're in person, and those opportunities to connect. And some people are recommending just doing a few touch points, very short each week, to have that sort of regular in touch feeling where you can have that casual chit chat, as you emphasized, not exclusively focused on the work, and checking in with people, just like you said, and having that human element. So I think that's something, and you again underscore the importance of communication. We need to be doing that and over communicating more than ever. We have a question from the outside that I want to ask about your thoughts of casting a wider net in hiring and hiring internationally. And I want to add to that question, because I think the hybrid environment is really an opportunity to go broader, because a lot of employers have historically said, like, oh, we'd love to be hiring diverse talent, but we're just in, and we're in the Midwest and we have these constraints. It's not, there's not as enough diverse talent here. So now we've learned that remote work can work. So is part of the answer not just hiring internationally, but being more geographically dispersed in our outreach of recruiting so that we can get access to great diverse talent?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for it. I think that there's still I think there's work to be done, and it remains to be seen. So I think that, Debbie, you're absolutely right that we've proven a lot about working remotely, working from home, that we maybe either didn't know before or had doubts about before. I think that there's still some work to do there. I've been now with two companies during the pandemic, and questions just around productivity, not right or not wrong, but just, are there better ways to measure it, and can you see it? And so I think that for the whole industry, I think that those questions are going to remain unanswered for some time. But in terms of a wider net, I think of it in terms of, you can't always have the skills that you may need or want where you're located. And I do think that, what this has proven is that, there may be someone with a certain skill set that's in a different location or in a different geography. And I think that minds are probably more open to that now than maybe they would have been had we not had the pandemic. I'm looking for a silver lining in the pandemic.
Right.
But I do think that this may be one of them in terms of giving people, hey, I would not have thought about a remote worker, but gee, I'm a privacy attorney, and there's a terrific lawyer in Europe who's very experienced with GDPR, and maybe they can help me because I'm looking to go global. So, I think having that more of an open mind and some real proof points that you've experienced will hopefully get us further down that road.
And I think picking up on that notion of having an open mind, you underscore the importance of that in terms of how you outreach to potential schools, let's say, and that same open mind should apply in other skills that you try to adapt to outreach to diverse talent. And I really think that's an important theme to underscore. We have another question from my friend Crystal Studevant, who is an Axiom colleague, and she's saying, what have you found to be successful in retaining diverse talent? Because those challenges are often even greater. So let's move to really retention and ask you, in the various roles that you've had, what have you seen to really make the difference in terms of getting diverse talent to be engaged and stay with a company or firm?
Well, first, hi, Crystal, and thank you for your question. And maybe to look at my own experience in part to answer this, I was very fortunate at a number of, I think, important points in my career to have leaders who believed in me and allowed me to take some chances and to step maybe out of the job description or out of the comfort zone to explore some other things. And that was, I think, part of the diversity of experience that I brought to those particular situations. And rather than say, no, stay in your lane, they were very encouraging about, no, go ahead and explore that. Don't forget your day job, but go ahead and explore those other things too. And so for me, I've tried to encourage that among folks who've been on my team as well, that, we all have blind spots, and you could write the perfect job description, or you could have the perfect idea about how you want to fit someone in on your team. But I may have a blind spot, and I may be missing something that I ought to be thinking about, or will maybe better position me a year, 2 years from now if I start thinking about it today. And, oftentimes it's that diverse point of view based on those diverse experiences that, give you that kind of thinking that maybe you wouldn't get if you go very, very traditional. And I think that's part, frankly, of the beauty of diversity, because it can mean so many different things. You mentioned geographic before. We obviously can talk about racial diversity, but gender, there's geographic, military experience, the list goes on and on. But again, to me, it goes hand in hand with the question before around talent as well, casting that wide net so that you really have exposure to really as complete a talent pool as you can.
I think one of the issues, though, that I'm particularly concerned of right now, in the fact that most of us are still working exclusively remote or at best in a hybrid environment, is the research around diverse individuals feeling invisible. The ABA Commission did a really powerful report on that visible invisibility. And my concern is in a remote environment, diverse lawyers will be feeling that much more invisible. How do you recommend that they really are able to stay front and center and fight against that feeling of invisibility and really be able to ensure that this doesn't become one more impediment during the pandemic?
Yeah, I would say, there's some things that you can do maybe if you're in a leadership position, and then, I'll speak maybe to the other side of it if you're part of the, employee base. May sound simple, but I really encourage you to do that. And that is, leveraging tools like Zoom, like, any kind of video as opposed to the phone. I talk to colleagues all the time, and I know personally I've increased my use of video platforms during the pandemic. Whereas, when we were in the office, it was nothing to pick up a phone, or even better, start to text somebody if you needed to have a quick conversation. And I was probably over indexing on using those methods of communication. But what I found during the pandemic, intentionally calling meetings and intentionally making sure that we had a Zoom number or some kind of video platform, and then really encouraging people to turn the camera on. And it wasn't so, we could see that you didn't get dressed to come to work today kind of thing, but really to foster this kind of engagement, because you do miss, I think, when you look, we don't see all of the body language on these cameras, but it certainly, you see more and can judge more around, how people react to what you say when you can see their faces at least. And, I think that it's probably the best we can do given what we have now to make up for that. But I think leveraging the tools is very important. And I also go back to one of the things I said earlier about being intentional and having empathy in terms of making sure that you're having those touch points. And Debbie, you said it really well, even if it's short, even if it's 2, 3, 4 minutes, but just to check in on folks. As the employee, you can do that as well. And I wouldn't want to walk past taking some ownership and accountability of maintaining the relationships, just like you may do with friends and family. It's not as easy in this situation to maintain those relationships as it was when you can hop in the car and go to someone's home. But you do that for folks who you're close to. And I think you need to invest in your work relationships in a very similar way. And it's important to make sure that we're keeping that connectivity.
And also, I want to underscore the point you made earlier about your own career and how you've had success in your career. And it's been through what people call now sponsorship, really having a power broker believe in you, take risks with you, and really support you. And as Carla Harris says of Morgan Stanley, the most important decisions about your career are made when you're not in the room. And I think using those sponsors right now is more important than ever because none of us are in the room. So being able to access those sponsors and really show your value to them, because those people who backed you and were able to help you advance in your career, they weren't doing you a favor. You were delivering to them. So I think now's the time as an employee to show your value to those people who are senior to you and really deliver to them, and they will in turn do that to you. Not that it's a quid pro quo, but it's a way to get it done. And I think what's another opportunity here is, and this is picking up on a question actually we have from Jackson Foster, which is what are things that outside counsel and other legal service providers, what else can they do to help the D&I initiatives at companies like yours? How can they be a resource, and how can that be helpful for those outside attorneys to get the business?
Debbie, I will certainly answer that question, and thank you for it. But I want to pick up on what you said because can't underscore that point enough about, I remember the first time I was in one of those rooms and you start talking about people who aren't in the room. And it is true. And someone told me even before that, a mentor of mine told me about how you really don't know how much people or how often people talk about you, and wasn't saying it in a catty way at all, but it purely professional. And it's so true. I mean, and if companies are doing right by themselves and right by their employees, they ought to be talking about the employee base often, and talking about who are the high performers and what can we do to give her or him even greater responsibility, and what are we doing about folks who are the up and comers, and making sure that they have visibility, and if there are performance challenges, how are we getting folks on the right path? I mean, those are the types of things that healthy companies, good managers do. And it is such an important point. So when you think about it that way, and you think about it as, gee, I'm going to go out on a limb and sponsor Debbie, or I'm going to sponsor so and so, it's not like you're absolutely right. They're not doing it's not a quid pro quo, but they're actually investing their capital too, and they don't have unlimited capital to invest. So I looked at it from that perspective, and I wanted, I certainly had my own goals and aspirations, but wanted to do well by them as well, because I know that, again, it was an investment for them. But I do want to pivot to the other question, and again, appreciate that. I think when you think about legal service providers, law firms, and what you can do, I think in the diversity space in particular, it's important how you show up. And what I mean by that is, I think that firms, again, need to be intentional about how they staff and manage certain matters. I was very fortunate early in my legal career to have connected with a partner who, took me to meet with his clients and gave me, big responsibility on handling certain matters. But a lot of my peers didn't have those opportunities. And I think it impacted their development and the opportunities they maybe had 3, 4, 5 years down the road. So I think, when firms show up at my door, or when I was, in the legal role, when they show up at my door, I was always interested in terms of, were there women, were there minorities who were helping us with our matters? And it wasn't a numbers game. I just want to be very clear about that. But I wanted to make sure that we had a broad representation of talent. I was very interested in terms of, what folks' experience level was, what types of things that they do, and what were they bringing to the table for us. And so for me, I think that, the things that you can do is be, again, very intentional about how you staff certain things, how you present your abilities to clients like Fiserv, and really be thoughtful about when you're putting, a first or second year associate on a matter, who's making up that team. Again, I have friends of mine for many years who've seen it where, the same group of associates would seem to have first choice over certain work. And then whatever they didn't want, the rest of the associates would get. And oftentimes they were white males. And so, I hope as our profession progresses that you'll see really just broader opportunities for folks, particularly at that level, because I think it's so formative in terms of what you become as an attorney in particular. Those experiences can really help guide you on your path. For me, if I can just really quickly, Debbie, my 4 years before law school, I worked for an insurance company. And so for me in the law firm, I connected with the partner who was a former superintendent of insurance in New York, but it was that experience having worked as a non-lawyer at an insurance company that really helped establish that connection. And frankly, it actually helped me in the practice, because there were things about the business I knew that you would never have learned in law school. I learned it through 4 years of working.
And I want to stick with that, because I think a lot of times lawyers focus so much on being a good practitioner, but they don't focus on the extras that, in my mind, really differentiate those who thrive and those who wither. And to me, this is about advancement. What are those extras? In my own experience, I find the lawyers who are not just top notch, but they also are great at networking. They are great at developing those sponsorship relationships. They're effective self-advocates. They are able to contribute and demonstrate their value every day, those extra connections that they're making with people. and executive presence, those people who are not just communicators, but excellent communicators who can do so with gravitas and real conviction. What are extra qualities that you're seeing that really differentiate those colleagues you've had who have been able to advance?
Yeah, it goes again, borrowing from personal experience and that I've seen of peers. It's really applying those, what I call those outside experiences that maybe you didn't learn when you were sitting in con law class or your advanced evidence class, but applying those experiences in a way that are beneficial for where you are at a particular time. I always remind in-house counsel, for example. It doesn't matter if you're litigating or you're a privacy lawyer or what have you. Understand how your company makes money, and that sounds simple, but it's so important because if you really truly understand how the company makes money, I think that's how you can really help beyond just providing legal advice, for example, but where you might know, and then your intellectual curiosity can also take over. So you're reading more things, and you may be aware of a regulatory challenge outside of what you do day to day, but an emerging kind of risk in the industry. Those types of things through extracurricular reading can become apparent. So I think that there's a couple of things. I think it's maintaining that curiosity. I do think that, actively thinking about your experiences and how they may contribute to your success. Debbie, you said it very well, networking, but don't network for, your immediate benefit. It's really got to, I think people have a good sense of when somebody is doing something for the wrong motivations. And so if you can, again, approach that with the right level of humility, and not with expectations other than, hey, I'd like to form a relationship. Maybe we could have a virtual coffee. Maybe we could, talk. One of the things I did early in my career was I actually posed a business challenge to someone who became a mentor of mine because I was genuinely curious to get his point of view on something. And teed it up with him, and then we had a lunch and sat through and talked it through, and he gave me some really, really good coaching and advice, and that kicked off a much, much deeper and longer relationship. So sometimes it's a way to maybe get answers to questions that you may have. But people are going to want to see the work that you put into the relationship too. I think one of the mistakes that I've seen folks make is expecting too much from a relationship or expecting too much from an employer, and folks may be seeing that they're not putting in the work themselves.
There's so many good threads of advice in that. I think I wrote a piece several years ago called Make Your Ask a Give, which is really about how do you see yourself as a resource? How can you be helpful rather than have your hand out? And I think that's what your ideas are really underscoring is the value of being that person who's there to help and roll up your sleeves and help in any way you possibly can, and maybe in ways that you never thought you could be helpful. There's another question that's burning on my mind around this issue around investment in diverse talent is we're in a really difficult period right now. And so a lot of employers are laying people off, they're in furloughs. And the question is, how do we keep this issue of investing in diverse talent top of mind, given the business realities of today?
Again, a very tough question. I don't know that there's a right answer other than I kind of come back to what we talked about before. And just, even in the worst of economic times, think back 10 years ago in the financial crisis, companies were still looking for prime talent. And so I think part of the challenge is making sure that you can position yourself, if you're looking at this individually, as a viable and worthwhile candidate. I think that it's a challenge for employers. I've seen far too often. I think the financial crisis is an example. There were a couple of other times, maybe earlier in my career, where I saw this. But when things get difficult economically, sometimes diversity falls off the rails, and I think that's a mistake that companies make. Again, because the talent game doesn't change. And I think it's really incumbent on companies to make sure that they're making or that they're performing their evaluations in a way that, makes, again, there are no guarantees, but make sure that you're really retaining your top talent. What I've seen before are companies that maybe delegate too far down the organization to make decisions around who stays and who goes, and where those decisions sometimes became more personal than what was best for the company. And I think companies run the risk of losing out when they do that. I think the technology has made it even both more important, but also gives companies a better opportunity to keep that talent. What do I mean by that? Dating myself somewhat, but earlier in my career, I'll say, presence in the office was a bigger deal. I remember, staying beyond 12, 1 o'clock in the morning because you had to be at the office in order to turn documents. Things like that you can do from home now. So, there may be a talented woman on your team who just had a baby, for example, and, she can still, she'll outperform maybe the other men on the team, right? But don't make a mistake around what you do with her because she's not quote unquote present in the office. The technology allows you, right, the ability for her to be present just as much, if not more. So I think, with the technology advances, we eliminate a lot of the excuses that maybe existed before, but we've got to be mindful again that we're making the right decisions and we're doing it for the right reasons.
I think you're absolutely right. And another piece of that is when you hear rumblings of this or this sort of lack of focus around diversity in these challenging times economically, to me, it speaks to the need to step up on the business case again. Like, oh yeah, we thought this was clear. We thought this was ironclad. But when you focus on that and it's just, this is the business reality that's going to change and improve the status of the business, to me, that's what you've got to come back to and really highlight. We are almost out of time. I have one thing I really want to hear from you and then wrap it up. What else can and what should white allies be doing in particular right now that you're not seeing enough of? And if you could touch on that, and then, like I said, I'd like to wrap up.
Great. It I think comes back to some of the points around empathy that we've talked about. And I think it's really one, I think we're better as a society. And again, I mentioned earlier, I'm a big sports person. I think, remembering what team we're on, we're on the same team. If we're at a particular company or we're in a particular profession. And so, treating each other like teammates, having that level of respect, having that level of empathy and listening. I think that we all can improve in terms of the way that we listen and engage with one another. And not necessarily want to judge right or wrong from everything you hear, but understand that people have and bring different experiences to the table. And, from those experiences, I think we can all learn and be better. And so, I grew up in a wonderful town in New Jersey, and I had exposure to people from all walks of life and backgrounds, but not everyone, when I went to college, had that same experience. And I know, my experience to them was a bit of a novelty, and theirs was to me. And so you learn from each other from that without trying your best not to judge. I think that that's really important. The other thing too, and I'll mention, because it's been in the news, is that, when you talk about opportunity, when you talk about the profession, I think we've got to really recognize too that, now we're at I think just an important time as a society where, because of George Floyd and the aftermath of that, companies have really, I think, stepped up in terms of asking a lot of questions of themselves and of their employees. For me, the critical part is going to be the next 12 months. What happens from that? And I think action is now really required. I think companies have made a good faith first step in terms of acknowledging, hey, we have these challenges, these problems out there. Now, what are we going to do? And again, I think it involves us getting out of comfort zones having the conversations that maybe we didn't have before because they were too difficult, but we do need to have them. And I think, again, remembering whose team we're on, we can have those discussions in a way where we're respectful of one another and not judgmental. And hopefully we all learn together.
Those are such important points, and I share your love of sports and passion for that as a former athlete myself. And two of my three sons played on the same basketball team that Kobe Bryant used to play on with the same coach. So there's a lot that we'll follow up on that whole thread. But your emphasis on action as the final step here, and really the next indicators of how committed, in fact, companies and firms are, is just the best way for me, in my mind, to end this conversation, because it's great that the awareness has been elevated. It's great that there's more of a consciousness, and now it's all about the deliverable. So with that, I want to thank you so much, Neil, for your friendship and your wisdom and your generosity in sharing this conversation with me. These are really difficult conversations to have. And with having people like you who are leaders in our community to be able to be open and educate us, I'm deeply appreciative. So thank you so much. And a big thank you to Axiom for hosting this conversation. And thanks again.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, everyone who listened in today and who listens to the tape broadcast. Thank you so much.
Great to see you.